My husband sued for full custody, calling me unstable. My daughter asked the judge, "Can I show you what Daddy does?" When the screen lit up, the judge ordered the doors locked. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. It was the kind of snowstorm that usually keeps sensible people indoors, curled up by a fire with a cup of cocoa. The wind was howling across the highway, turning the world into a blur of white and gray, but I wasn't feeling the cold. I was feeling that specific kind of warm, bubbly excitement that sits right in the center of your chest when you know you're about to make someone's day. I had gifts in the trunk, expensive ones. A vintage watch for my father-in-law, Hank. A designer cashmere coat for my mother-in-law, Peggy. And for my husband, Robert, well, I had something even better. I had the keys to a new luxury sedan he'd been eyeing for months. I gripping the steering wheel of my SUV, navigating the slick roads of the Chicago suburbs. I had told Robert the first wouldn't be able to make it until Christmas morning because of a crisis at the logistics company where I work as an operations manager. It was a little white lie. I wanted to see the look on his face when I walked through the door on Christmas Eve. I wanted to be the hero. I pulled up to the house around 8 p.m. It was a beautiful, sprawling colonial-style home that my parents had bought decades ago. When they passed, and I eventually married Robert, I let his parents move in. They always complained about their small apartment, and I, being the woman who just wanted a big, happy family, opened the doors to my inheritance wide for them. The house was glowing. Golden light spilled out from the living room windows onto the fresh snow. I could see the silhouette of the massive Christmas tree I had paid for. I parked on the street so they wouldn't see my headlights, grabbed the smaller gift bags, and trudged through the snow. My boots crunched softly, but the wind covered the sound. I didn't knock. I still had my key, of course. It was legally my house, after all. I opened the back door, the one leading into the mudroom off the kitchen, intending to sneak in and shout surprise. But as soon as I stepped inside and shook the snow off my coat, I froze. The house wasn't just filled with Christmas music, it was filled with laughter. Boisterous, triumphant laughter. I crept closer to the kitchen doorway, which opened up into the living room. I could see them, but they couldn't see me in the shadows of the hallway. There was Robert, my husband of 5 years, standing in the center of the room. He was holding a glass of my expensive scotch, his face flushed with a joy I hadn't seen in him in a long time. But he wasn't looking at his parents. He was looking at a woman sitting on the plush velvet sofa. It was Crystal. I knew Crystal. Or at least, I thought I did. Robert had introduced her a few months ago as a distant cousin who had fallen on hard times and needed a place to crash. I had generously allowed her to stay in one of my rental condos in the city, rent-free for a few months, because that's who I was, a fixer, a helper. But right now, Crystal wasn't acting like a distant cousin. She was reclining on the sofa, rubbing her belly, looking smug. To Robert, Hank bellowed, raising his glass. To the man of the hour. Robert beamed, puffing out his chest. No, Dad, to Crystal, he shouted, his voice slurring slightly. To the woman who is finally giving me what Cynthia never could. My breath hitched. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Robert dropped to his knees in front of Crystal, placing a hand on her stomach. Crystal is pregnant. I'm finally going to be a dad. A son. We're going to have a son. The room erupted in cheers. Peggy clapped her hands, her face twisted in a look of pure delight. Oh, thank God. A grandson. Finally, a true heir to carry on the name. I was so worried you'd be stuck with that barren workaholic forever. I stood there, paralyzed. My hands were trembling so hard the gift bags rustled, and I terrifyingly pressed them against my chest to silence them. Barren? Robert and I had never even really tried. He always said he wasn't ready, that we should wait until his investments paid off. It was a lie. It was all a lie. But Bobby, Crystal pouted, running a finger through Robert's hair. What about her? She's going to be furious when she finds out. Peggy waved her hand dismissively, taking a sip of wine. Don't you worry your pretty little head about Cynthia. We have the plan. The plan? Crystal asked. The power of attorney, Robert said, his voice dropping an octave but still loud enough for me to hear every devastating syllable. She's going to sign it next week. She trusts me. She thinks it's just so I can handle her taxes and property maintenance so she can focus on her precious job. Hank laughed, a rough, gravelly sound. Once she signs that document, Robert has full control over her assets. The inheritance, the properties, the bank accounts. Everything. We'll transfer the liquid cash first, Peggy added, her eyes gleaming with greed. Then we kick her to the curb. We'll file for divorce on Robert's behalf, and with the assets already moved or hidden, she'll be left with nothing. We'll move you and the baby in here, Crystal. Where you belong. And Cynthia? Robert sneered, standing up and kissing Crystal on the forehead. She can go live in that tiny apartment my parents used to rent. See how she likes the simple life. I felt bile rising in my throat. My vision blurred. I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm in there and flip the table, smash the expensive scotch bottle over Robert's head, and tear that smug look off Crystal's face. But I didn't. Years of working in logistics, of managing crises and navigating disasters, suddenly kicked in. My brain switched from heartbroken wife to operations manager. If I walked in there now, I would just be the hysterical wife. They would gaslight me. They would deny it. Or worse, they would realize I knew the plan before I signed the paper, and they might do something desperate. I looked at them one last time. The family I had loved. The husband I had supported. The people I had saved from mediocrity. They weren't family. They were parasites. Peggy put a finger to her lips, smiling at the group. Shoo, let's not spoil the night. Just remember, be nice to her for one more week. Just until the ink is dry. I stepped back. Then another step. I turned around, pushed the back door open, and stepped out into the freezing blizzard. I closed the door silently behind me, engaging the lock. As the wind hit my face, freezing the tears on my cheeks, I made a silent vow. You want my signature? You want my inheritance? You want a war? Congratulations, Robert. You just got one. The drive away from the house was a blur, but my mind was traveling further back than just the snowy road ahead. It was traveling back 18 years, trying to pinpoint the exact moment I had become their mark. You have to understand, I wasn't born into a cynical world. I was born into a world of softness and light. My parents, James and Eleanor, were kind people. They were wealthy, yes, my father had built a logistics empire from the ground up, but they were never arrogant. They believed in community. They believed in helping neighbors. That's how we knew the Millers. Hank Miller worked at one of my father's warehouses. He was a shift supervisor. My dad liked him, thought he was a hard worker who just had a run of bad luck. Our families started spending time together. I was an only child, and Robert was 2 years older than me. We played in the backyard while the adults had barbecues. Looking back now, with the clarity of a woman who just heard her mother-in-law call her barren, I can see the signs I missed. I remember how Peggy used to look at my mother's jewelry. It wasn't admiration, it was hunger. It was a covetous, green-eyed stare that tracked every diamond earring and pearl necklace. I remember Hank making jokes about how some people have all the luck while chugging beer bought with my father's money. He would clap my dad on the back a little too hard. Must be nice, James. Must be nice to sit in the office while the real men break their backs. My dad would just laugh it off. We're a team, Hank. Couldn't do it without you. But the real turning point, the tragedy that sealed my fate, happened when I was 16. It was a rainy October night. My parents were coming back from a gala. A drunk driver in a pickup truck jumped the median. The police said they died instantly. They said they didn't suffer. I suffered. I remember sitting in the massive, silent living room of the house, the same house I had just fled from, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the universe. I was 16, I was an orphan, and I was terrified. That's when the Millers stepped in. They didn't just offer condolences, they moved in. Literally. Hank and Peggy told me that social services would put me in foster care if I didn't have guardians living with me. They said my parents would have wanted them to take care of me. "We're your family now, Cynthia," Peggy had said, hugging me. I remember smelling her cheap perfume and feeling safe. I thought it was love. I didn't realize she was mentally measuring the curtains for her own redecoration. Hank took over managing the household. He started driving my father's cars. He started drinking the wine from the cellar. He told me, "I'm just keeping the engines running for you, sweetheart. You focus on school." And Robert, teenage Robert, became my rock. He was the shoulder I cried on. He was the one who defended me from bullies at school who whispered about the poor little rich girl. I fell in love with him not because he was extraordinary, but because he was there. He was the only constant in a world that had crumbled. There was a warning sign, though. A big, flashing neon sign that I ignored. Linda. Linda was Robert's older sister. She was 18 when my parents died. She was different from them. She didn't fawn over my house. She didn't ask to borrow my clothes. She was quiet, angry, and always watching her parents with a look of disgust. About 6 months after they moved in, Linda packed a bag. I found her in the kitchen in the middle of the night. "Where are you going?" I asked, clutching my teddy bear. "Away from here," Linda snapped. She looked at me, and her expression softened for a split second. "You should run too, Cindy. They aren't who you think they are." "Who?" "My parents. Robert. They're leeches. Don't let them suck you dry." Before I could ask what she meant, Hank came into the kitchen. He grabbed Linda by the arm and dragged her out the front door. There was shouting. I heard Hank yell, "You ungrateful brat. You ruined this for us, and you're dead to me." Linda left that night. The next morning, Peggy told me Linda had mental issues and had run off to join a cult. "It's tragic," Peggy wiped a fake tear. "But we have to focus on us now. We have to protect you." I believed them. I believed Linda was crazy because the alternative, that the people hugging me were monsters, was too scary to contemplate. I spent the next decade being grateful. I paid for the renovations Hank wanted. I paid for Robert's college tuition, even though he barely attended classes. I bought Peggy the furs she wanted. I thought I was sharing my blessings. I didn't realize I was just feeding the sharks. And now, driving through the snow, the memory of Linda's warning echoed in my head louder than the storm outside. "They're leeches. Don't let them suck you dry." "I'm sorry, Linda," I whispered to the empty car. I didn't listen. But I'm listening now. By the time I was 24, I had full control of my inheritance. It was a substantial amount, a mix of liquid assets, stocks, and a real estate portfolio that included the family home and several luxury condos in downtown Chicago. I was also working my way up in the logistics world, determined to honor my father's legacy by understanding the business from the ground up. I didn't just want to be an heiress, I wanted to be capable. Robert, on the other hand, had potential. That's what Peggy always called it. Robert has so much potential, he just needs the right opportunity. He had bounced from major to major in college, never finishing a degree. When I graduated and started working, Robert decided he wanted to be a day trader. He used all the buzzwords: crypto, forex, shorts, leverage. It sounded impressive. I can make us millions from the living room, babe, he had told me, flashing that charming smile that used to make my knees weak. You go run the warehouse. I'll build the empire from home. So, I set him up. I bought him the top-of-the-line computers, the multiple monitors, the ergonomic chair. I gave him seed money. And then, he proposed. It was on a yacht I had rented for his birthday. He got down on one knee, presented a ring, which I later found out he bought using the credit card I paid for, and gave a speech about how we were destined to be together. You saved me, Cynthia, he said. Let me spend the rest of my life taking care of you. I said yes. Of course I said yes. I wanted to formalize the family unit I had clung to since I was 16. The wedding was, well, looking back, it was Peggy's wedding. She invited all her friends, people I didn't know. She picked the flowers. She dictated the menu. When I tried to suggest a smaller, more intimate ceremony, she grabbed her chest and acted like she was having a heart attack. After all we've done for you, Cynthia? We raised you. This is our day to be proud. So I relented. I walked down the aisle alone, because Hank insisted he should meet me at the altar with Robert, symbolizing the family welcoming me, rather than giving me away. It felt weird, but I went with it. We moved into the penthouse condo downtown, one of my properties, leaving Hank and Peggy in the big suburban house. They claimed they needed the space for storage and to keep the family memories alive. I let them stay, rent-free, paying all the utilities myself. For 5 years, things seemed stable. I worked 60-hour weeks. I was exhausted but fulfilled. I rose to operations manager. I solved problems for a living. Robert, meanwhile, was always busy. He would be in his office with the door closed. The markets are volatile, babe, don't come in, he'd shout if I knocked. At dinner, he'd talk vaguely about big wins coming soon or blame market manipulation when I asked why the joint account wasn't growing. I never pushed. I didn't want to emasculate him. I wanted to believe in him. Then came the power of attorney conversation. It started about a month ago. Robert made me a fancy dinner, a rare occurrence. He poured me wine, rubbed my shoulders, and started talking about efficiency. You're working too hard, Cindy, he crooned. I hate seeing you stressed about property taxes and maintenance requests for the rental units. You barely have time for yourself. I can handle it, I mumbled, tired from a 12-hour shift. But you shouldn't have to. Listen, I talked to a lawyer buddy of mine. If you sign a durable power of attorney, I can handle all the boring admin stuff for you. I can sign the checks, deal with the contractors, file the taxes. You just go to work and come home to relax. He slid a document across the table. It was thick. Dense legal jargon. It gives me full authority to act on your behalf, he explained, his eyes locking onto mine. It's standard for married couples with assets like ours. It just means we're true partners. I hesitated. I need to read it over, Robert. Maybe have Mr. Henderson look at it. I saw a flash of anger in his eyes, quick, sharp, terrifying. But it vanished instantly, replaced by a hurt puppy look. You don't trust me? After 18 years? After I've been your rock? No, it's not that, I backpedaled, guilt washing over me. It's just business. Fine, he sighed, pulling the paper back slightly. Read it. But do it soon, okay? The end of the fiscal year is coming, and I want to get things organized for us. For our future. For our future. That phrase haunted me as I drove through the snow, away from the scene of his betrayal. He wasn't planning our future. He was planning his future with Crystal. He wanted that signature so he could rob me blind legally. He wasn't a traitor. He wasn't a partner. He was a con artist playing the long game. And I had almost handed him the keys to the vault. My hands were shaking so badly I had to pull over onto the shoulder of the highway. The snow was coming down harder now, a white curtain isolating me from the rest of the world. I opened the car door and dry heaved into the snowbank. My stomach was empty, but my body was trying to purge the toxicity of what I had just witnessed. The image of Robert's hand on Crystal's stomach. The sound of Hank's gravelly laugh. Peggy's barren comment. It wasn't just heartbreak. Heartbreak I could handle. This was a violation. It was as if they had broken into my soul and ransacked it. I sat back in the driver's seat, shivering uncontrollably. I blasted the heater, but the cold was coming from inside me. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. The screen lit up with Robert's name. A photo of us from our honeymoon, smiling, tanned, happy, mocked me. I picked it up. A text message. Robert, Merry Christmas Eve, babe. Mom and Dad miss you. We're just having a quiet night, watching old movies. Wish you were here. The house feels empty without you. Love you. A quiet night. Empty without me. I stared at the words until they blurred. He lied so easily. He lied via text while standing 10 feet away from his pregnant mistress. He was probably showing the text to Crystal right now, and they were laughing about how gullible I was. Rage. It started as a spark in my chest, burning away the grief. It grew hotter, fiercer. I wasn't just a sad wife anymore. I was the operations manager who had navigated supply chain crises during a global pandemic. I was the woman who managed millions of dollars of logistics contracts. I dealt with incompetent vendors and lying contractors for a living. I realized something crucial right then, sitting on the side of the I-90. I haven't signed the power of attorney. I laughed. It was a jagged, hysterical sound that frightened me a little. They were celebrating their victory, but they had celebrated too early. They were popping champagne before the contract was signed. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and looked at myself in the rearview mirror. My mascara was smeared, my eyes red. I looked like a victim. No, I said aloud. My voice sounded foreign, scratchy. Not a victim. I put the car in drive and merged back onto the highway. I wasn't going to the condo. That place was tainted. Robert had probably brought Crystal there when I was at work. I needed a war room. I drove to a luxury hotel downtown, the kind where discretion is part of the price tag. I booked a suite for a week using a credit card that Robert didn't have access to, one of the few financial boundaries I had kept, thank God. Once inside the room, I stripped off my clothes, threw them in a pile, and stood under a scalding hot shower. I scrubbed my skin until it was red, trying to wash off 18 years of their influence. I stepped out, wrapped myself in a robe, and sat at the desk. I didn't cry anymore. I opened my laptop. First step, verify the assets. Second step, secure the perimeter. Third step, gather ammunition. I logged into my bank accounts. The joint account was lower than it should be, much lower. I scrolled through the transactions. Cash withdrawals. Consulting fees paid to companies I didn't recognize. Then I checked the rental portal for my properties. I owned 4 units downtown. 3 were rented out to reliable tenants. The 4th, a 2-bedroom unit in Lincoln Park, was listed as occupied family/no rent. Crystal. I checked the logs. She had been there for 6 months. Robert had told me she needed it for a few weeks. 6 months of free rent in a prime location. That was easily $18,000 in lost income. I opened a new document on my laptop and titled it, Project Eviction. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Robert. Robert, are you still at work? Don't work too hard. Make sure you get some rest so you can sign those papers on Tuesday. I want to take them to the lawyer first thing. Tuesday. That was 3 days away. I typed a reply, my fingers flying across the screen. I needed to buy time. I needed to play the role of the oblivious, loving wife one last time. Me, hey honey. Crisis at the warehouse is worse than I thought. A shipment of medical supplies is stuck. I might have to fly to the distribution hub in Denver tomorrow morning. I'm so sorry. I'll make it up to you. I hit send and held my breath. 3 dots appeared. Then stopped. Then appeared again. Robert, oh no. That sucks. Well, you're the boss. Go save the world. We'll do the papers when you get back. Love you. He sounded relieved. Of course he was. He had more time to play house with Crystal in my childhood home. Go save the world, I muttered, reading his text. No, Robert. I'm going to burn yours down. I barely slept. My dreams were a feverish mix of snowstorms and laughing faces. When I woke up on Christmas morning in the hotel room, the silence was deafening. No family breakfast. No exchanging gifts. Just the hum of the hotel heater and the cold light of day. I ordered room service, coffee, black, and a fruit plate I didn't touch, and picked up my phone. I had to make a call I should have made 10 years ago. I searched for the name Linda Miller on social media. I hadn't spoken to her since the night she was dragged out of the kitchen. Robert always said she was unstable, addicted to drugs, living on the streets. I found a profile. Linda Miller Davis. Veterinary technician. Portland, Oregon. The profile picture showed a woman with kind eyes, graying hair, smiling next to a golden retriever and a man who looked like a lumberjack. She didn't look like a drug addict. She looked happy. She looked free. I found a phone number listed for her veterinary clinic's emergency line. It was a long shot, it was Christmas, but I dialed. Portland West Vet, emergency line, this is Linda, a voice answered. It was professional, crisp. Linda? My voice cracked. It's Cynthia. Cynthia Sterling. Silence. Long, heavy silence. Cynthia? Her voice softened, losing its professional edge. Little Cindy? I'm not so little anymore, I said, a tear slipping down my cheek. And, you were right. You were right about everything. Linda let out a breath that sounded like a curse. What did they do? Did they take the money? They're trying to. But I caught them. Linda, Robert has a mistress. She's pregnant. They were celebrating in my parents' house last night. They think I'm going to sign a power of attorney next week. That son of a b***tch, Linda hissed. The anger in her voice was validating. It was the first honest emotion I had heard from a Miller in years. And let me guess, Mom and Dad were there cheering him on? Yes. Hank said something about finally having an heir. And he said something else, he said he was taking back what was his. Oh, God, Linda sighed. He's still on that? Cynthia, you need to know the truth. The real truth. Not the garbage they fed you. Tell me. My dad didn't just work for your dad. They started the company together. Way back in the day. But my dad, he has a gambling problem. Always has. He gambled away the payroll money in '95. Your dad caught him. Instead of sending him to jail, your dad bought out Hank's share for a fair price to cover the debts and kept him on as a supervisor so he could feed us. My jaw dropped. What? Yeah. Your dad was a saint. He saved my dad from prison. But Hank? In his twisted, narcissistic mind, he rewrote history. He told us your dad stole the company. He told us your dad cheated him. He raised Robert on that poison. He groomed Robert from the day he was born to get back what the Sterling stole from the Millers. So, the marriage. It was a long con, Cynthia. I tried to tell you that night in the kitchen. I tried to tell you to run. But I was 18 and scared, and they kicked me out. I leaned back against the headboard, feeling sick. It wasn't just greed. It was vengeance. I was the proxy for my dead father. They were punishing me for my father's kindness. They think I'm weak, Linda, I said, my voice hardening. They think I'm just a checkbook. They're wrong, Linda said firmly. I remember you. You were a tough kid. You survived losing your parents. You survived living with those vampires for 18 years. You can survive this. I don't want to just survive, I said. I want to destroy them. Good, Linda said. Listen to me. Robert is lazy. He's sloppy. If he's cheating, he's leaving a trail. And my mother? She's a gossip. She can't keep her mouth shut. You need to hit them where it hurts. Money and reputation. I'm going to, I promised. Would you be willing to testify? If it comes to court? About the history? About Hank's gambling? Honey, Linda laughed, a dark, satisfied sound. For a front row seat to see Peggy Miller's face when her house of cards falls down? I'll fly to Chicago tonight. I'll bring popcorn. Thank you, Linda. Stay by your phone. I hung up, feeling a surge of adrenaline. I wasn't alone anymore. I had an ally. And not just any ally, I had the one person who knew exactly where the bodies were buried because she had watched them dig the graves. I looked at the project eviction document on my screen. I added a new line. Step 4, the reunion. It was time to call a lawyer. A real shark. Not the friendly family attorney Robert tried to get me to use. I needed someone who ate people like Robert for breakfast. The day after Christmas, while most of the world was nursing hangovers and eating leftovers, I was sitting in the plush leather chair of Mr. Anthony Henderson's office. Henderson was a legend in Chicago divorce law. He cost $800 an hour, and he was worth every penny. He looked like a bulldog in a suit, bald, stocky, and with eyes that missed nothing. I laid it all out. The overheard conversation. The text messages. The power of attorney document, which I had photographed before leaving. Linda's testimony about the past. Henderson listened without interrupting, tapping a gold pen against his notepad. When I finished, he leaned forward. Okay, Mrs. Sterling. Here's the good news. Illinois is an equitable distribution state, but inheritance is separate property if it hasn't been commingled. Have you put Robert's name on the deed to the parents' house? No, I said. He asked, many times. I always said I wanted to keep it in the Sterling name for sentimental reasons. Smart girl, Henderson grinned. What about the rental condos? Sole ownership. Acquired before marriage via the trust. Excellent. Now, the bad news. If you divorce him now, based solely on what you heard, he will fight for alimony. He'll claim he supported your career by managing the household. He'll claim he's accustomed to a certain lifestyle. He could drag this out for years. I don't want to pay him a dime, I said coldly. Then we need cause, Henderson said. Adultery affects alimony. But more importantly, we need to prove financial dissipation. If he spent marital assets on his mistress, we can claw that back. We need a forensic audit. Do it, I said. I brought my laptop. I have access to everything. We spent the next 4 hours digging. Henderson brought in his forensic accountant, a quiet woman named Sarah. What we found was staggering. Here, Sarah pointed to the screen. You see these withdrawals? $500, $800, $1,000. Almost daily. They're coded as cash from ATMs at casinos in Joliet and Hammond. Robert told me he went to networking events there, I whispered. He's gambling, Henderson said. And losing. Look at this. He drained the emergency savings account, $40,000, 3 months ago. My blood ran cold. He told me he moved that to a high-yield bond. It's gone, Mrs. Sterling. And here. Sarah pulled up the rental records for the Lincoln Park unit. The tenant, Crystal Vance. No rent paid since June. But look at the utilities. They're being paid from your joint checking account. I stared at the screen. I was paying for the electricity that kept his mistress warm. I was paying for the water she showered in. That's dissipation of assets, Henderson said, his voice grimly satisfied. He is using your money to support his paramour. That is theft from the marital estate. And the business trips? I asked. He goes to Vegas twice a year for conferences. Sarah clicked a few keys. Airline tickets for 2. Robert Miller and Crystal Vance. Hotels at the Bellagio. Spa treatments. Dinners at Nobu. All on the joint credit card. I felt sick, but also vindicated. He's not a traitor. He's a thief. He's a parasite, Henderson corrected. Now, here is the strategy. Do not file for divorce yet. Do not let him know you know. We need to catch him in a way that is undeniable. We need to catch him stealing something that isn't marital property. Something that is yours alone. Like what? Does he have access to your jewelry? Your art? Bearer bonds? My mother's jewelry, I said, remembering Peggy's hungry eyes. It's in a safe in the condo. But Robert knows the combination. Change the combination to the wall safe, Henderson said. But leave something valuable out. Or make it seem accessible. If he is desperate for money, and judging by these gambling losses, he will try to liquidate assets soon. Especially if you cut off his cash flow. Cut off the cash flow? You need to hire a property management company, Henderson said. Immediately. Tell Robert you're doing it to relieve his burden like he suggested. Have them take over rent collection for all units. Have them serve eviction notices to any non-paying tenants. I smiled. It was a vicious, sharp smile. Crystal. Exactly. Serve Crystal an eviction notice. Serve his parents an eviction notice for the big house you can claim you're renovating or selling. Cut off the money. Squeeze them. And watch them panic. And when they panic? When they panic, they will make mistakes. They will commit crimes. And we will be watching. I left Henderson's office with a contract for a private investigator, a plan to install hidden cameras, and a heart made of stone. I returned to the penthouse late that night, acting exhausted. I had practiced my lines in the mirror of the hotel room. Robert was on the couch, watching football. He jumped up when I came in, trying to gauge my mood. Babe! You're back! How was Denver? Nightmare, I lied smoothly, dropping my bag. Total logistical failure. I might have to go back next week. He hugged me, but I felt his body tense. He smelled of Crystal's perfume, a cheap, flowery scent that clung to his sweater. I forced myself not to recoil. I missed you, he said, lying into my hair. Did you think about the power of attorney? Actually, Robert, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I pulled away and walked to the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of water to keep my hands busy. He followed me, eyes wide with anticipation. I realized you were right, I said. I am working too hard. I can't manage the properties and my job. Exactly. He beamed. So you'll sign? Well, I thought about it. And I realized that asking you to do it isn't fair either. You have your trading. You're busy building our empire. I don't want to burden you with fixing toilets and chasing rent checks. His smile faltered. It's no burden, babe. I enjoy helping. No, I won't hear of it, I said firmly. So, I hired Apex Property Management. They're taking over everything starting January 1st. Next week. Robert went pale. What? I signed the contract this morning in Denver. They're amazing. They handle everything. Rent collection, evictions, maintenance. They're even going to do an audit of all the leases to make sure we're getting market rate. Panic flared in his eyes. Naked, raw panic. An audit? Cynthia, that's a waste of money. They charge like 10%. It's worth it for peace of mind, I said breezily. Oh, and they're strict. They said any tenant more than 30 days overdue gets an automatic 3-day notice to pay or quit. No exceptions. Robert looked like he was going to vomit. Crystal hadn't paid in 6 months. She was going to be on the street in 3 days. You should have consulted me, he stammered. We're partners. I wanted to surprise you. I kissed his cheek, my lips cold. Now you're free, Robert. No more property headaches. You can just focus on making us millions in the market. He forced a smile that looked like a grimace. Right. Yeah. Great surprise, honey. I'm going to take a shower, I said. As soon as the bathroom door closed, I pulled out my phone. I opened the app linked to the hidden cameras I had installed while he was out getting coffee, visiting Crystal, earlier that day. I had placed them in the living room plants, the kitchen smoke detector, and on top of the bookshelf in the office. I watched the feed. Robert was pacing the kitchen, frantically typing on his phone. Then he made a call. Mom? Mom, pick up. She did something. No, she didn't sign. Worse. She hired a management company. Yes. An audit. They're going to find out about Crystal's lease. No, I can't stop it, she already signed. I don't know. We need money. Crystal is going to be evicted. Okay. Bring Dad. Come over tomorrow. She said she's going back to Denver on Monday. We need a plan. I sat on the edge of the bathtub, watching him unravel. That's right, Bobby, I whispered to the screen. Call your mommy. Bring them all here. Step right into the spiderweb. The next morning, Sunday, I packed a bag. They need me back in Denver, I told Robert, looking apologetic. Inventory crisis. I'll be gone for a week. Maybe 10 days. 10 days? Robert tried to hide his relief but failed. Wow. That's a long time. Well, don't worry about the house. I'll hold down the fort. I know you will, I said. Oh, and Robert? The safe in the office. I changed the combo. I realized I had written it down somewhere stupid, so I updated it. I'll tell you when I get back. Why would you? Okay, he frowned. Whatever. Just go. Drive safe. I left the condo. But I didn't go to the airport. I drove 2 blocks away to the hotel where I had extended my stay. I set up my command center. Laptop open. 3 screens. Pizza ordered. I was about to watch the destruction of the Miller family live in HD. The feed from the cameras was crisp and clear. The audio was studio quality. I felt like a producer on a reality TV show, one titled Desperate Grifters. I had barely been gone an hour when the doorbell of my penthouse rang. Robert opened it. Peggy marched in first, wearing the cashmere coat I had given her last Christmas. Hank followed, looking furious. And trailing behind them, looking sullen and wearing a tight tracksuit, was Crystal. "Are you insane?" Peggy shrieked before the door was even closed. "Bringing her here? What if Cynthia comes back?" "She's in the air, Mom," Robert shouted back. "She's gone for 10 days. And Crystal had to come. She got the notice." Crystal threw a piece of paper onto the kitchen island. "They taped it to my door, Bobby. Pay or quit. They want $18,000 in back rent by Friday or the sheriff comes." "Apex Management doesn't play around," Robert groaned, rubbing his temples. "I told you, Cynthia hired sharks." "She's doing this on purpose," Hank growled, pacing the living room like a caged bear. "She knows." "She doesn't know," Robert insisted. "She was sweet as pie this morning. She thinks she's helping me. She's trying to be efficient. It's that corporate brain of hers. That corporate brain is ruining us." Peggy yelled. "If Crystal gets evicted, where does she go? She can't come to the house, the neighbors will talk." "I need money," Crystal whined. "I need prenatal vitamins. I need a stroller. And now I need $18,000? You promised me this would be easy, Bobby. You said she was a pushover." "She is a pushover," Robert snapped. "We just hit a snag." "A snag?" Hank slammed his fist on my imported Italian dining table. I winced watching it. "We are losing the golden goose. If she audits the books, she'll see the utilities. She'll see the transfers. We need that power of attorney," Peggy said, her voice dropping to a sinister, calculating tone. "If Robert signs for her, he can fire the management company. He can waive the back rent." "She won't sign it," Robert cried. "She keeps stalling." "Then we make her sign," Hank said darkly. I leaned closer to my laptop screen, my heart pounding. "What do you mean?" Robert asked. Hank looked around, as if checking for listeners. "She's driving a lot lately, right? Snowy roads. Accidents happen." "Dad." Robert looked horrified. "No. I'm not. I don't want to kill her. I just want her money." "I'm not saying kill her," Hank backpedaled, though his eyes said otherwise. "I'm saying she gets into an accident. Maybe she gets hurt. She's in the hospital, on painkillers." Robert brings the papers. "Sign this, honey, for the surgery." She signs. "Done." "That's too risky," Peggy argued. "What if she dies? Then the inheritance goes to—" "Wait, does she have a will?" "I don't know," Robert said. "She probably left it to charity or something stupid. She doesn't have siblings." "We need to find out," Peggy said. "Go check the office. Check the files." "The safe is locked," Robert said. She changed the combo. "Break it open," Crystal shouted. "You're a man, aren't you? Smash it." "It's a titanium wall safe, Crystal, I can't just smash it with a hammer." "Then look for the jewelry," Peggy said, her eyes lighting up with that familiar greed. Her mother's pearls. The diamond studs. The sapphire set. If we sell those, we can pay Crystal's back rent and buy ourselves some time. That's stealing, Mom, Robert said weakly. It's not stealing. Peggy snapped. It's family property. Those pearls should have been mine anyway. Her mother flaunted them in my face for years. It's reparations, Robert. Go get them. Robert hesitated. He looked at Crystal, who gave him a teary, pleading look. For our son, Bobby. Don't you want him to have a roof over his head? That did it. The idiot nodded. She kept a jewelry box in the vanity, too, Robert said. Not the safe. The daily stuff. But some of it is real gold. Go, Hank commanded. I watched as my husband, the man I vowed to love and cherish, led his mistress and his mother into my bedroom to ransack my belongings. I picked up my phone and called Mr. Henderson. They took the bait, I said, my voice trembling with rage. They're looting the bedroom now. And Hank just suggested causing a car accident to get me to sign the POA. You have that on video? Henderson asked sharply. Audio and video. Crystal clear. Okay. That moves this from civil to criminal conspiracy. Do not intervene yet. Let them take the items. We need the theft to be completed. Did you photograph the jewelry in the vanity? Yes. And I have the appraisals. Good. Let them dig their grave a little deeper. Are they staying there? It looks like they're settling in. They're opening my wine. Let them get comfortable, Henderson said. Let them feel safe. We strike when they least expect it. I hung up and watched the screen. Robert came back into the living room holding my mother's pearl necklace, a double strand of Mikimoto pearls worth $15,000. He handed it to Crystal. Try it on, he said. Crystal clasped it around her neck and preened in the hallway mirror. Classy, she smirked. I look like the lady of the house. You will be soon, Peggy promised, toasting her with my vintage Cabernet. I felt a cold calm settle over me. Enjoy the pearls, Crystal. They'll be the evidence that puts you in handcuffs. Monday dragged on like a slow-motion nightmare. From my hotel command center, I watched my life being dismantled, frame by frame. It wasn't just the theft of the jewelry that broke me, it was the casual, callous way they erased me from my own home. By mid-afternoon, Crystal had fully moved into the master bedroom, my bedroom. Through the camera hidden in the smoke detector, I watched her rummage through my walk-in closet. She wasn't just looking for things to sell, she was trying on my life. She pulled out my silk blouses, the tailored blazers I wore to board meetings, and even my lingerie. She held up a red lace teddy I had bought for our anniversary last year, one Robert had barely glanced at. A little loose in the bust, she giggled, tossing it to Robert, who was sitting on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. But nothing a few safety pins can't fix. What do you think, Bobby? Do I look like the lady of the manor? Robert looked up, his face pale and sweaty. Just, don't rip it, Crystal. Cynthia notices everything. She won't notice if she's in a hospital bed, Crystal sneered, referencing Hank's dark suggestion from the night before. Or if she's too busy dealing with a divorce she didn't see coming. Then, the violation deepened. Peggy walked in, carrying a tray of food. My food. She had raided the pantry. She was eating the imported Swiss chocolates I saved for special occasions and drinking tea from my grandmother's delicate china cups. She put her feet up, boots still on, right onto my cream velvet chaise lounge. Mud and slush smeared into the fabric. Did you find the rest of the gold? Peggy asked, her mouth full of chocolate. Just the stuff in the vanity, Robert said, kicking a pile of my clothes aside. The wall safe is impenetrable. I tried the default codes. I tried her birthday. I tried our anniversary. Nothing. Useless, Peggy spat. Well, take what we have to the pawn shop on 47th Street. The guy there doesn't ask questions. We need cash for Crystal's lawyer if that management company tries to evict her tomorrow. I can't go today, Robert whined. The roads are still icy. And what if Cynthia tracks the car? She has that GPS app. Disable it. Peggy yelled. My God, Robert, do I have to think of everything? You want to be the man of the house? Act like it. Sell the jewelry. Get the cash. Secure our future. I watched Robert stand up, walk over to the pile of jewelry they had dumped on the dresser, my mother's pearls, the sapphire earrings, a gold tennis bracelet I bought with my first bonus, and scoop them into a velvet bag. I'll go tomorrow morning, he muttered. I'll tell Cynthia I'm going to the gym if she calls. My hand hovered over the phone. I wanted to call the police right then. I wanted to scream, "Don't you dare touch those pearls." They were the last thing my mother wore. They still smelled faintly of her perfume, or at least, I imagined they did. Seeing Robert's clammy hands shoving them into a sack like trash made my vision blur with red-hot rage. But Mr. Henderson's voice echoed in my head, let the theft be completed. Let them dig the grave deeper. If I called the police now, Robert could claim he was just moving them for safekeeping. He could claim he was taking them to be cleaned as a surprise for me. He was a slippery liar, and without the act of selling them or removing them with intent to permanently deprive me of them, it might just be a civil dispute. I needed him to try to sell them. Or at least, I needed undeniable proof of the conspiracy to sell them. I zoomed in on the camera feed. Crystal was now sitting at my vanity, using my La Mer face cream. She scooped out a huge chunk with her long, acrylic nails and smeared it over her face. This stuff costs like $300 a jar, she scoffed. Rich people are so stupid. We'll be rich soon, Peggy said, reclining on my chaise lounge. And we won't be stupid. We'll spend it on things that matter. Like a new truck for your father. And a nursery for the baby. The baby. The magical heir. I switched tabs on my laptop. I had received an email from the private investigator Henderson had recommended. The subject line was simply, Subject, Crystal Vance Medical History. I opened the attachment. It was a background check that went deeper than just credit scores. It included insurance claims and hospital records obtained through a subpoena Henderson had rushed through regarding the dissipation of assets claim. I read the first paragraph. Then I read it again. Then I started to laugh. It was a cold, hard laugh that bounced off the walls of the empty hotel room. Oh, Robert, I whispered, wiping a tear of pure, dark mirth from my eye. You idiot. You absolute, colossal idiot. They were planning a murder for an heir that didn't exist. They were destroying their lives for a ghost. I looked back at the screen. Robert was holding Crystal's hand, rubbing her belly, looking at her with a reverence he had never shown me. I promise, he was saying. I'll fix this. I'll get the money. And then it's just us. You, me, and little Robert Jr. Little Robert Jr. I closed the laptop lid. I didn't need to see anymore. I had the ammunition. Now, I just needed to load the gun. Tuesday morning. The day of the reckoning. The sky was a brilliant, hard blue, the kind that hurts your eyes. The snow from the blizzard had frozen into jagged sheets of ice, making the city look like it was encased in glass. It felt appropriate. Everything was transparent now. I met Linda at a diner halfway between the city and the suburbs. I hadn't seen her in 18 years, but I recognized her immediately. She had the same sharp jawline as Robert, but her eyes were different. They were clear, kind, and currently burning with a fierce protectiveness. She stood up when I walked in and hugged me hard. It wasn't a polite hug, it was a rescue hug. It smelled like rain and pine needles, a scent of the freedom she had found away from that toxic house. You look expensive, she said, pulling back and assessing my coat. And tired. I feel expensive and tired, I admitted, sliding into the booth. Coffee? I'm paying. You're always paying, aren't you? Linda said, shaking her head. That's their whole business model. The Bank of Cynthia. We spent the next hour strategizing. I showed her the videos. I showed her the transcripts of Hank talking about the accident. Linda watched them with a grim expression, her hands clenched around her mug until her knuckles turned white. He's gotten worse, she said quietly. He used to just be a drunk and a gambler. Now this is sociopathic, Cynthia. Talking about hurting you like it's a business transaction. That's why I need you, I said. When the police come, I need someone to corroborate the pattern. The long history of manipulation. I need them to know this isn't just a domestic dispute. It's a conspiracy. I'm in, Linda said. I brought my old journals. From when I was a teenager. I wrote down everything Hank said about your dad. About the plan to get the money back. It proves premeditation going back decades. It proves Robert was raised to be a weapon. Perfect. My phone buzzed. It was Mr. Henderson. Cynthia, his voice was crisp. We have the warrant. Based on the video evidence of them discussing the sale of stolen goods and the conspiracy to commit bodily harm, yes, the judge took the accident comment very seriously. We have authorization for police intervention. When? Tonight. We don't want to spook them. Let Robert go to the pawn shop today. The police are already notified to watch the shop. If he sells the items, they will tag them as evidence and let him return home. We want everyone in the house together. They're having a celebration dinner tonight, I said. I heard Peggy planning the menu. They think I'm stuck in Denver for another week. A celebration, Henderson scoffed. How poetic. Officer Miller, no relation, will meet you at the staging area down the street at 7 p.m. Do not go in alone, Cynthia. Robert is desperate, and desperate men are dangerous. I'll be careful. One more thing, Henderson said. The pregnancy. I saw the report, I said. It's admissible, Henderson confirmed. We can prove fraud. If he transferred money for prenatal care, that's fraud. It strengthens the case for dissipation of assets. I'm going to tell him, I said. I want to see his face. That is your right, Henderson said. Just make sure the police are in the room when you do. I hung up and looked at Linda. It's a go. 7 p.m. Linda took a deep breath. You know, when I left that house, I thought I'd never go back. I thought I'd escaped. But watching you, it makes me realize I ran away. You stayed and fought. I didn't fight, I said bitterly. I was asleep for 18 years. I'm just waking up now. Well, Linda smiled, raising her coffee mug. Morning has broken. Let's go wake them up too. We spent the afternoon running errands that felt surreal given the violence we were planning. We bought boxes for the movers I had scheduled for the next morning. We bought new locks for the doors. I was essentially planning the logistics of an eviction and a demolition simultaneously. At 5 p.m., I received a notification from my bank app. A deposit of $4,500. I checked the source. Main Street Pawn and Loan. Robert had done it. He had sold my mother's pearls. The pearls that were insured for $15,000. He sold them for pennies on the dollar to a fence, probably thinking he was a genius. My heart broke a little more, but my resolve hardened into diamond. He had crossed the line. There was no going back. He had officially stolen from me. I texted Henderson, the transaction went through. He sold them. Henderson replied, "We have the receipt." "It's a felony. See you at 7. I looked at Linda. "He sold them." Linda reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We'll get them back. But first, we take out the trash." I stood up, buttoning my coat. The operations manager was in full control now. The logistics were set. The assets were tracked. The liabilities were about to be liquidated. "Let's go home," I said. The street was dark and quiet when we pulled up, parking 3 houses down from my penthouse building. The snow piles were gray and hard, like dirty concrete. I sat in the driver's seat of my rental car. I hadn't wanted Robert to recognize my SUV headlights, and watched my own balcony. I could see shadows moving behind the sheer curtains. They were there. All of them. A black unmarked police cruiser pulled up behind us. 2 uniformed officers and a detective in plain clothes stepped out. The detective approached my window. "Mrs. Sterling?" "Yes. I'm Detective Kowalski. Mr. Henderson briefed us. We have a warrant for Robert Miller for grand larceny and fraud. We also have a warrant to search the premises for the stolen goods if they haven't been sold." "He sold the pearls," I said, my voice steady. "But he might still have the sapphire earrings and the diamond studs." "Okay. We'll handle the arrest." "You said the parents are there too?" "Yes. Hank and Peggy Miller. And the mistress, Crystal Vance. We'll secure the scene. You stay behind us until we give the clear." "No," I said. "I have a key. I'm opening the door. I want them to see me first." Kowalski hesitated, looking at Linda. "Ma'am, we suspect the father suggested violence. It's a risk." "I'm not going in alone," I said. "But I am opening that door. It's my house." Linda nodded at the detective. "She needs to do this. I'll be right beside her." Kowalski sighed. "Fine. But if I say move, you move. Understood?" "Understood." We walked to the building entrance. My key fob still worked. Robert hadn't thought to change the locks, assuming his manipulation was enough security. We took the elevator up to the penthouse floor in silence. The hum of the elevator felt incredibly loud. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of fear and adrenaline. When the elevator doors opened, I could hear the music. Jazz. My favorite jazz playlist. They were playing my music while they drank my wine and plotted my murder. I stood in front of the heavy oak door. I looked at Linda. She gave me a grim nod. I looked at the police officers positioned on either side of the hallway, out of the peephole's view. I took a deep breath. I imagined my father standing behind me, his hand on my shoulder. I imagined my mother whispering in my ear. "Take it back, Cynthia. Take it all back." I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a smooth, heavy click. Inside, the laughter was loud. "To the pearls." I heard Hank shout. That pawnbroker didn't know what he had. "To the future." Robert cheered. I threw the door open. It slammed against the wall with a thunderous crash that silenced the room instantly. For a second, nobody moved. It was like a tableau of depravity. Robert was sitting on the leather sofa, his arm around Crystal. Crystal was wearing my white silk robe, the one I wore on my wedding morning. Peggy was sitting at the dining table, eating a steak off my fine china. Hank was pouring wine. They all froze, staring at the doorway. I stepped in. I was wearing my sharpest business suit, a long black trench coat, and heels that clicked ominously on the hardwood floor. I didn't look like the crying wife. I looked like the executioner. "Cynthia?" Robert's voice was a squeak. He scrambled to stand up, spilling wine on the rug. His face went from flushed to ghostly white in a nanosecond. Babe? You're in Denver. Am I? I asked, my voice echoing in the sudden silence. Funny. I thought I was in the hotel down the street watching you sell my mother's jewelry. The color drained from Peggy's face. Hank dropped the wine bottle. It shattered, sending red liquid splashing across the floor like blood. Cynthia, wait, let me explain, Robert stammered, holding his hands up. He tried to step toward me, putting on his charm mask, though it was slipping fast. It's not what it looks like. Crystal, she's sick. She needed help. Help? I asked, tilting my head. Is that why she's wearing my wedding robe? Is that why you were kissing her 5 minutes ago? Is that why you toasted to your son? Crystal pulled the robe tighter, her eyes darting around the room like a trapped rat. He told me you were gone. He said you wouldn't be back for a week. Shut up, Crystal. Robert roared at her, then turned back to me, desperate. Cindy, please. You're tired. You're imagining things. We can talk about this. We're done talking, Robert, I said. I stepped aside. Linda stepped into the doorway. Hello, Mother. Hello, Dad, Linda said, her voice dripping with ice. Peggy gasped, clutching her chest for real this time. Linda? You traitorous little. And we brought friends, Linda added. The police officers stepped into the room, their hands on their holsters. The room seemed to shrink. The air was sucked out of it. Robert Miller, Detective Kowalski announced, his voice booming. Step away from the woman and put your hands where I can see them. The party was officially over. The chaos that followed was a symphony of panic. It was chaotic, loud, and utterly satisfying. It was the moment the illusion shattered, and the rats started scurrying. Police? Why are the police here? Peggy shrieked, jumping up from the table. This is a family misunderstanding. Cynthia, tell them to leave. How dare you bring cops into our home? It's not your home, Peggy, I said, my voice cutting through her hysteria. And it's not a misunderstanding. It's a crime scene. Robert was trembling so hard his knees looked like they were going to buckle. Officer, wait. I live here. This is my wife. I haven't done anything wrong. You can't arrest a man in his own living room. We have a warrant, Mr. Miller, Kowalski said, walking steadily toward him. For grand larceny. Selling stolen goods to a pawnbroker. We have the receipt. We have the video surveillance from the shop. And thanks to your wife, we have video of you taking the items from the home. Video? Robert whipped his head around to look at me, betrayal written all over his face. The irony was almost funny. You recorded me? Every second, I said, walking further into the room. I felt powerful. I saw you break into the vanity. I saw you give the pearls to Crystal. I heard you talk about staging a car accident to kill me. Hank, who had been standing near the shattered wine bottle, suddenly lunged toward me. You vicious little B***TCH. I knew we should have. Before he could finish the threat, or reach me, the second officer tackled him. It wasn't graceful. Hank, old and out of shape, went down hard, his face pressing into the wine-soaked rug. He grunted in pain, but the sound was drowned out by Peggy's screaming. Dad! Robert screamed, instinctively moving forward, but Kowalski grabbed his arm and spun him around, slamming him against the wall. Do not move! Kowalski shouted. You are under arrest. Crystal started screaming. It was a high-pitched, piercing sound. She curled up into a ball on the sofa, pulling my wedding robe over her head. I didn't do anything. I'm pregnant. You can't touch me. Stress is bad for the baby. I walked over to the TV cabinet. I picked up the remote. My hands were steady. Pregnant, I repeated, looking at Crystal. Are you sure about that, Crystal? Yes, she sobbed. Ask Bobby. We're having a son. Robert, I said, turning to look at my husband, whose cheek was pressed against the drywall as the officer cuffed him. Do you really believe her? Do you really think you're going to be a father? Don't talk to her, Bobby. Peggy yelled, trying to pull the officer off Hank. She's trying to trick you. She's jealous because she's barren. I'm not barren, Peggy, I said coldly. I just never wanted to have children with a parasite. I pointed the remote at the smart TV on the wall. I think we should all watch a little movie. Since you like movies so much. I cast the screen from my phone to the TV. The video started playing. It wasn't the footage of them stealing. It was the footage from the night before, the strategy meeting. On the giant 65-inch screen, Hank's face appeared, red and angry. She's driving a lot lately, right? Snowy roads. Accidents happen. Then Robert's voice, I don't want to kill her. I just want her money. Then Peggy, if she dies, does she have a will? The room went silent, save for the sound of the handcuffs clicking on Robert's wrists. You plotted to kill me, I said, looking at Hank, who was being hauled to his feet, blood trickling from his nose. Conspiracy to commit murder. That's not just a family spat, Peggy. That's 20 years in prison. We were just talking. Robert sobbed. It was just talk. We wouldn't have done it. You sold my mother's pearls, I said. You crossed the line from talk to action. You stole from me to fund a life with a woman who is lying to you. I turned my attention to Crystal. She was peeking out from the robe, looking terrified. Tell him, Crystal, I said softly. Tell him about the baby. I don't know what you mean, she stammered. Oh, I think you do. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my trench coat pocket. Mr. Henderson is very thorough. This is your medical file, Crystal. Robert stopped struggling against the cuffs. What is she talking about? I walked up to Robert. I held the paper up so he could see it. Read it, Robert. Tubal ligation. 2 years ago. Crystal can't get pregnant. There is no baby. There is no heir. You destroyed your life, you tried to destroy mine, and you sold your soul, for nothing. But, she showed me the test, Robert whispered, his eyes widening as the truth hit him. She had morning sickness. She had a hangover, Robert, I said. And the test was fake. You destroyed your life for a prop. The silence that followed my revelation was heavier than the blizzard outside. It was the silence of a world shattering. Robert stared at the paper. His eyes darted back and forth, reading the medical terminology that spelled out his doom. Tubal ligation. Irreversible. No, he whispered. No. We saw the test. She showed me the stick. It was positive. You can buy positive pregnancy tests online for $10, Robert, I said, my voice dripping with pity and disgust. Or use synthetic hormones. You, the great investor, didn't do your due diligence on the biggest investment of your life. He turned his head slowly to look at Crystal. The betrayal on his face mirrored the betrayal I had felt on Christmas Eve. But I felt no sympathy. Only a cold, hard satisfaction. Crystal, he choked out. Tell her she's lying. Tell her about our son. Crystal shrank back into the sofa cushions. The game was up. She dropped the act of the weeping victim and her face twisted into a scowl. She looked at Robert with pure contempt. "You were supposed to be rich," she screamed at him. "You said you had millions. You said she was stupid and you controlled the money. I needed rent, you loser. I didn't think you'd actually get arrested. You lied?" Robert's voice broke. He slumped against the officer holding him, his legs giving out. "But I did everything for you. I stole for you. I lost my wife for you." "You didn't lose me, Robert," I interrupted, stepping into his line of sight. "You threw me away. You treated me like an ATM with a pulse. You and your parents spent 18 years grooming me, using me, and laughing at me behind my back." I gestured to the camera I had hidden in the bookshelf. "You thought I was the naive little orphan girl who needed you," I said, my voice rising, gaining power with every word. "You thought I was weak because I was kind. But kindness isn't weakness, Robert. It's a choice. And tonight, I'm choosing justice." I looked at Peggy and Hank, who were now both handcuffed, sitting on dining chairs under the watch of the second officer. Hank was cursing under his breath, while Peggy was hyperventilating, trying to play the frail old woman card. "And you," I said to them. "You took in a grieving 16-year-old girl and you saw a paycheck. You didn't love me. You loved my house. You loved my credit score. You loved the life my father built. We gave you a home." Peggy spat, though she looked terrified. "We were a family. A family doesn't plot to stage a car accident for their daughter-in-law." I shouted. "A family doesn't call their daughter barren and useless while drinking her wine. You are not my family. You are parasites. And I am officially calling the exterminator." I walked over to the camera hidden in the plant stand. I knew the red recording light was blinking. I knew I would need this footage for court, for the restraining order, and for my own sanity, to remind myself never to be that blind again. I looked directly into the lens. I took a deep breath, letting the adrenaline steady me. "If you are still listening," I said, my voice trembling slightly with the aftershocks of the confrontation, addressing the invisible audience of the future, "please, like this video and comment the number 1 below. Let me know that you're amazing, and that I understand you've been with me throughout this entire journey. Your support is a huge encouragement, cheering me on. Please comment 1 so I can recognize you, and now, listen as I continue to tell my story." I turned back to the room. The police officer looked at me with a mixture of confusion and respect. "Okay, Mrs. Sterling," Detective Kowalski said. "We have enough. We're taking them in. Do you want us to remove the woman, Ms. Vance, as well? She's not being arrested?" I asked. "Not yet. Unless you want to press charges for trespassing." I looked at Crystal. She was pathetic. Scared, broke, and wearing a stolen robe. "No," I said. "I don't want her in a cell. I want her on the street." I walked over to Crystal. "Get out. Leave the robe. Leave the jewelry. Get out of my house." "But it's snowing," Crystal wailed. "I have nowhere to go. My car is out of gas." "Start walking," I said. "You wanted my life? Well, this is the part where you face the consequences. Get out." Crystal scrambled up, shedding the silk robe and revealing her cheap clothes underneath. She grabbed her purse and ran out the door without looking back at Robert. Robert watched her go. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face. "Cynthia," he whispered. "Please. I'm sorry. I was weak. They made me do it. My dad, he pressured me. I love you. Please, tell them it was a mistake. Don't let them take me to jail." I looked at him. I looked for the boy I had loved in high school. I looked for the man I had married. But all I saw was a stranger in handcuffs. You made your choice, Robert, I said softly. You chose the lie. Now you have to live with the truth. I nodded to the detective. Take them away. The scene of my husband being escorted out of our home wasn't quiet. It was a spectacle, and for once, I didn't care about the neighbors. Detective Kowalski shoved Robert toward the door. He was stumbling, his expensive Italian loafers dragging on the hardwood floor he had once claimed he owned. Cynthia! Robert wailed, trying to turn back, his body twisted awkwardly against the restraints. Don't let them do this. Who will manage the portfolio? Who will take care of you? I've been taking care of myself since I was 16, Robert. I shouted back, following them into the hallway. And my portfolio? It'll do just fine without a gambling addict draining it. The elevator ride down was excruciating for them. I took the stairs, arriving in the lobby just as the officers were marching the trio through the grand entrance. The flashing red and blue lights of 3 squad cars illuminated the snow-covered street. Neighbors had gathered, people in robes, walking dogs, peering from balconies. This was a high-end building, arrests didn't happen here. I saw Mrs. Gable from 4B. She was the neighborhood gossip, the one Peggy had always tried to impress. Peggy saw her too. It's a mistake. Peggy screamed to the crowd, trying to maintain some shred of dignity while being shoved into the back of a police cruiser. My daughter-in-law is having a breakdown. She's framing us. Save it for the judge, lady, the officer grunted, pushing her head down to clear the doorframe. Hank was less vocal. He was staring at the ground, defeated. The fight had left him. He knew the video recording was a nail in his coffin. But Robert broke my heart one last time, not with love, but with pity. As they pushed him toward the separate car, he saw me standing on the steps, wrapped in my coat, with Linda beside me. I have nothing, he sobbed, his voice carrying over the wind. Cynthia, I have nothing without you. You have a lawyer to call, I said, my voice steady though tears pricked my eyes. Goodbye, Robert. The car doors slammed shut. One by one, the engines revved, and the convoy of my past mistakes drove away into the snowy night. Silence returned to the street. The neighbors whispered, staring at me. I didn't look down. I looked back at them. I had nothing to hide. I was the survivor, not the villain. I walked back inside, Linda trailing me. We went up to the penthouse. The apartment felt huge. Empty. The energy had shifted. It no longer felt like a shared space, it felt like a battlefield after the smoke had cleared. I walked over to the dining table where the half-eaten steak still sat on my china. I picked up the plate and walked to the kitchen, scraping the food into the disposal. You okay? Linda asked, leaning against the counter. She looked exhausted but relieved. I feel light, I said, turning on the faucet. Is that terrible? My husband is in jail, and I feel like I just lost 200 pounds of dead weight. It's not terrible, Linda said. It's survival. You just cut out a tumor, Cynthia. It's supposed to feel better. We need to secure the house, I said, my operations brain kicking back in. The locks. The safe. And I need to call the bank first thing in the morning to confirm the freeze on the joint cards. The locksmith is 5 minutes out, Linda checked her phone. And the cleaning crew is coming at 8 a.m. You won't see a speck of their existence by noon. I walked into the living room and picked up the silk robe Crystal had discarded on the floor. It was stained with wine and cheap makeup. I walked to the balcony door, opened it, and threw the robe into the trash chute in the hallway. Good riddance, I whispered. That night, I didn't sleep in the master bedroom. I couldn't. The ghost of Crystal and Robert was too fresh there. I slept in the guest room, with Linda in the room next door. For the first time in years, I slept without the subconscious dread that I was being watched, judged, or scammed. I slept with the peace of a woman who had finally closed the most expensive deal of her life, buying back her freedom. The legal machinery ground forward with brutal efficiency. Robert couldn't make bail. The judge saw the flight risk. He had no job, no ties to the community other than me, and I had just filed for divorce. He stayed in county jail. Peggy, however, managed to scrape together a bail bond using her sister's home as collateral. She was released 3 days later. I knew she would go to the suburban house. It was her only refuge, or so she thought. I was ready. It was a Friday morning. I stood in the driveway of the house my parents had built. The snow had melted into a gray slush. Behind me stood Mr. Henderson, 2 private security guards, and a massive, rust-colored dumpster. We had executed an emergency eviction order based on the criminal activity clause in the lease agreement, a lease Robert had signed years ago as a formality, which explicitly stated that any illegal activity on the premises voided tenancy immediately. Conspiracy to commit murder definitely qualified. A taxi pulled up. Peggy stepped out. She looked haggard. Her gray roots were showing, her clothes were wrinkled, and her eyes were wild. She saw the dumpster. She saw the boarded-up windows. I had started renovations immediately. She saw me. "What is this?" she screeched, marching up the driveway. "What have you done to my house?" "It's not your house, Peggy," I said, my voice projecting clearly across the yard. "It never was. You were a guest. And guests who plot to kill their hosts get evicted." "You can't do this," she yelled, trying to push past the security guard. "My things. My furniture. My mother's china. It's all in the dumpster," I said, pointing to the metal container. "Well, the trash is. The items that actually belong to you, your clothes, your knickknacks, are in those boxes on the curb. Everything else? The furniture my parents bought? The art? The electronics? That stays. It's mine." Peggy looked at the boxes on the wet pavement. They looked pathetic. Small. Insignificant. "You monster," she hissed, lunging toward me. The security guard blocked her effortlessly. "We raised you. We wiped your tears. We gave you a family. You gave me a scam." I shouted back, my composure cracking for the first time. "You gave me 18 years of lies. You isolated me. You stole from me. You raised your son to be a thief. You aren't a mother, Peggy. You're a predator." "I did what I had to do," she screamed, tears streaming down her face. "Your father ruined us. He took Hank's dignity. We were just taking back what was owed. My father saved Hank from prison." I yelled. "Linda told me everything. Hank embezzled money. My dad covered for him. And instead of being grateful, you spent 20 years poisoning your son's mind with victimhood." Peggy froze. The mention of Linda seemed to slap her. "Linda," she whispered. "That traitor. She's the only decent person your bloodline produced," I said. "Now, take your boxes and leave. If you step onto this property again, these guards will arrest you for trespassing. And since you're out on bail, that means you go straight back to jail." Peggy looked at the house one last time. She looked at the window of the room where she had slept for nearly 2 decades. She looked at the dumpster. Then, her eyes darted to a small box near my feet. It was a box of gardening tools. My mother's old silver trowel was sticking out. She lunged for it. "That's mine. I used it for the roses. It has my mother's initials on it," I said, kicking the box behind me. "Go. Now." Peggy broke down. It wasn't a pretty cry. It was an ugly, guttural wail of a woman who had gambled everything and lost. She fell to her knees on the asphalt. "I have nowhere to go," she sobbed. "Hank is in jail. Robert is in jail. I have no money." "You have your sister," I said. "The one who put up her house for your bail. Go ruin her life for a while." I turned my back on her. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, walking away from a crying old woman. My instinct, the instinct she had groomed, screamed at me to help her. To write her a check. To fix it. But I kept walking. I got into my car. "Drive," I told Linda, who was behind the wheel. As we pulled away, I watched in the rearview mirror. Peggy was sitting on the curb, hugging a cardboard box, screaming at the empty house. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like a funeral. But it was a necessary death. The next 6 months were a blur of courtrooms, depositions, and signatures. I didn't just divorce Robert, I obliterated any trace of our union. Mr. Henderson was magnificent. He argued that because Robert had used marital funds to facilitate criminal activity, the pawnshop transaction, and support a mistress, dissipation of assets, he was entitled to nothing. The judge agreed. Robert didn't even fight it. He sat in the defendant's chair, wearing an orange jumpsuit, looking like a ghost. He signed the papers with shaking hands. The criminal sentencing came 2 months later. I sat in the back row. I wanted to see justice served. Robert pled guilty to grand larceny and fraud. He read a statement. He cried. He apologized to me, to his parents, to God. It was pathetic. 3 years, the judge said, banging the gavel. To be served in state prison. Robert looked back at me as the bailiff led him away. His eyes were pleading, asking for forgiveness? A second chance? I didn't give it to him. I just watched him disappear through the side door. Hank's trial was shorter. The video evidence of the conspiracy to commit murder was damning. He tried to blame it on alcohol, on stress. The jury didn't buy it. 10 years, the judge ruled. At 68 years old, Hank would likely die in prison. Peggy took a plea deal. She testified against Hank to save her own skin. She got probation and community service, but her life was effectively over. She was homeless, living on her sister's couch until she wore out her welcome, then moving to a state-subsidized efficiency apartment. Linda told me she works as a greeter at a Walmart now. I spent those months purging my life. I sold the penthouse. Even after cleaning it, the air felt stale. I sold it to a young tech entrepreneur who loved the view. I sold the suburban house. That was harder. It was my childhood. But walking through the empty rooms, I realized the memories had been tainted. I couldn't look at the kitchen without seeing Linda being dragged out. I couldn't look at the living room without seeing Robert proposing to Crystal. I sold it to a family with 3 kids and a golden retriever. When I handed over the keys, the little girl hugged me. "We love the garden," she said. "Take care of the roses," I told her, tears stinging my eyes. "They need a lot of sun." I liquidated the joint accounts, paid off the legal fees, and took what was left of my inheritance, which was still substantial, thanks to my father's trust structure protecting the core capital. Then, I looked at a map. Chicago was gray. It was cold. It was full of ghosts. I wanted color. I wanted air that didn't taste like betrayal. Denver, Linda suggested one night over wine. Big sky. Mountains. And far enough away that Peggy can't take a bus to find you. Denver, I repeated. It sounded like a promise. I packed my life into a few boxes, the real things, the things that mattered. My mother's photo albums. My father's watch. The pearls. The rest, the furniture Robert picked out, the clothes I wore to impress his friends, I donated to a women's shelter. The day I left, I drove past the county jail. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I just kept driving, watching the skyline of Chicago fade in my rearview mirror until it was just a smudge on the horizon. I was 34 years old. I was divorced. I was alone. And I had never felt more free. 3 years later. The air in Denver is different. It's thinner, crispier. It wakes you up. I sat on the patio of my new home, a bungalow in the Highlands with a view of the Rockies. It's smaller than the penthouse, smaller than the Colonial, but it's mine. Every pillow, every spoon, every paint color was chosen by me, for me. I have a garden now. A real one. I spent the morning pruning the rose bushes. They are a deep, velvety red, just like the ones my mother used to grow. But I also planted lavender, sage, and wildflowers. Things that grow wild and free. My life is quiet. I started my own logistics consulting firm. I work with small businesses, helping them streamline their operations. I don't work 60 hours a week anymore. I work enough to live well, and then I turn off my phone. I have friends here. Real friends. Not people who want my money or my connections. People who like me because I make a mean lasagna and because I listen when they talk. I haven't dated seriously. I've had coffee with a few men. A dinner or two. There was a nice architect named David who made me laugh. But I'm taking it slow. The trust is rebuilding, brick by brick. I'm learning that not every hand reaching out is trying to take something. Some hands just want to hold yours. My phone buzzed on the patio table. A video call from Linda. I answered it, smiling. Linda looked great. She had cut her hair short and was wearing a bright yellow sweater. "Merry Christmas in July," she shouted. "Merry Christmas in July." I toasted her with my iced tea. We talked for an hour. She told me about her vet clinic, about her dog's new tricks. Then, her voice got serious. "I heard from a friend in Chicago," she said tentatively. "About Robert." My stomach didn't drop. My heart didn't race. I just felt a mild curiosity. "Oh. He's up for parole next month," she said. He sent a letter to the lawyer. He wants to know if you'd be willing to write a character reference." I laughed. It was a genuine, full-bellied laugh that startled a bird off the fence. A character reference? I wiped a tear of mirth from my eye. He wants me to tell the parole board what a great guy he is? The audacity, right? Linda shook her head. "I told the lawyer to lose your number." "Thank you," I said. "I have nothing to say to Robert. He's a stranger." And it was true. The anger was gone. The hate was gone. In its place was just indifference. He was a lesson I had learned. A chapter 1 had finished. "How are you really?" Linda asked, searching my face on the screen. "I'm happy," I said. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't have to fake it. "I'm really, truly happy. I have my garden. I have my work. I have you. I have peace. You deserve it, Cindy." We said our goodbyes. I sat back in my chair and watched the sun dip behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. I thought about the woman I was 3 years ago. The woman driving through a blizzard, terrified and heartbroken. I wanted to hug her. I wanted to tell her, "It's going to be okay. You're going to burn it down, and you're going to build something better." They wanted to take everything from me. They wanted my inheritance, my house, my future. They thought I was weak. They thought I was just a checkbook with a pulse. But they forgot one thing. I was an operations manager. I knew how to fix broken systems. And my life was the most important project I ever managed. I picked up my trowel and walked back to the garden. There was a patch of weeds near the fence that needed clearing. I dug into the earth, feeling the cool soil against my fingers. I am Cynthia Sterling. I am a survivor. I am free. And to anyone listening, anyone who feels like they are trapped in a blizzard of lies, keep driving. The storm will pass. And on the other side, there is a garden waiting for you to plant it. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had to restart your life, or if you've ever had to stand up to people who underestimated you, leave a comment below. I read them all. Take care of yourselves, and remember, the best revenge isn't hate. It's happiness. And so, this story reminds us of one profound truth: resilience is not born from easy paths, but from the storms we endure. Cynthia's journey teaches us that strength is often hidden within, waiting to be uncovered when life demands it most. It's a reminder that self-worth is not defined by others' approval or intentions, but by our ability to reclaim our power, rebuild, and rise above betrayal. In life, there will be moments when we feel trapped, underestimated, or even broken. But as Cynthia's story shows, every setback is an opportunity to rediscover our courage, to set boundaries, and to protect what truly matters: our peace, our dignity, and our future. The past may shape us, but it does not have to define us. We hold the pen to write our own ending. What about you? Have you ever had to rebuild your life or stand up for yourself? Share your thoughts below. Or simply comment good if this story inspired you to value your strength and fight for your happiness.